think about yourself 5 years ago.
Okay.
What shape are you in compared to what you were in 5 years ago? Has your health and wellness declined? And by that we mean your energy levels, your mind, your body, your general health, your sleep patterns. Have they improved or got worse?
Good.
Then if you look around you at people in the 45 to 60 age category, because this is when it really starts to show up.
Yes.
You might get away with it until you're about 40,
Yes,
but then things start
youth is
to
on your
change.
side. Yes. Oh, don't we know it? And those people tuning in are going,
Yeah. So just have a think about the people at the office, in the company, the leaders of the company. What sort of shape are they in if they're in that 45 to 60 age bracket?
Yes.
And I would suggest that 1 out of 3 is probably deconditioned, overweight, maybe even obese. Some of them may have had or maybe battling cancer. Many of them, maybe 1 out of 3, is probably suffering type 2 diabetes.
Yep, that's
and
the
battling
stats.
all sorts of, of issues and illnesses. So basically that is what you're looking at. So if you're younger, that is what you're looking at. If you're at the early end of that age bracket, again, this is what you're looking at if you don't look after your wellness.
Hi and welcome back to The Peaks Life. I'm Mike Warren and again with Lynn Fernie. And today, slap on the wrist.
For who?
Well, for us, because I was thinking about prioritisation and we have missed a couple of podcasts because we may not have prioritised. We've been travelling and we've had some work on. But I was thinking about a lot of people having the challenges of prioritising things that are important to them and some of the challenges that got me onto thinking, and we get this question a lot from people around, how do I make my wellness journey successful? I'm a busy person. And we have a lot of busy people, executives or people in careers who are crying out they've got this lifestyle that is full of commitments, and yet we come along and we say, prioritise wellness. And they're screaming out, help me prioritise wellness, and how do I fit it in? So I thought it's a good discussion point because I'm slapping myself on the wrist because we haven't podcast for a couple of days. We didn't prioritise the podcast, so shame on us, but we're back.
Shame on us.
There you go, throw you a curly one again.
But I think this really applies a lot to busy executives. And I know you see everybody has a problem prioritising every now and then. But if I look at one group of people who are consistently busy with 1,001 excuses, and I'm going to call them excuses because they are excuses.
They are.
And there are lots and lots
They
of
could be
reasons.
genuine excuses, but they're still
They're
excuses.
still excuses. At the end of the day, let's look at all of the different aspects of the wellness journey that we work with. Whether you take food or you take fasting or you take movement and exercise, you take morning and evening routines, you take sleep, and you take a busy executive and you say to that person, do you prioritise wellness? And they'll say, oh, absolutely, I do. And that's the initial response because they put up the defence immediately. They don't like to be called on anything. But the reality is, you start to dig into the food. And what do you find? So you say, well, what about lunch? Do you eat a good lunch? Do you have whole foods? Do you have good quality proteins? Do you have good quality fats? And the reality is no. What do executives do at lunchtime?
Well, they often either grab a sandwich at their desk or they may go for a bite to eat, but they often grab food that's convenient unless they've prioritised and they've brought healthy food from home.
So not many executives, I would suggest, and I'm putting it out there that there's not many executives that are going to bring food from home.
And also not many are going to have that structured, it's 12 o'clock, it's lunchtime, because a typical, and when we say executives, I guess we're talking about people in the peak of their career, the people who are maybe climbing the executive ladder, and they have long days, they start early, they finish late, and lunchtime is just a small gap that they get. When it's when it happens, they can stuff their face with some food and move on to the next meeting.
Or there's no gap.
There's no gap, yes.
Yeah? So there's no gap.
Day.
They're going from meeting to meeting. They might grab something on the way past.
Yes.
Or they're at a meeting and food's provided, so they've got no control over what it is. They're hungry, so they eat.
Yep.
A lot of them are eating carb-based diets, so there's a lot of bread and pasta and pizzas and junk food in there. I know a lot of executives who literally at lunchtime would jump in the car, head off to the next, the nearest junk food drive-through, grab a whatever, McDonald's, Hungry Jack's, KFC, because it can be done in minutes, and then bring it back to the office and back to the desk, and then continue on with the next meeting. So they're eating shit food, and a lot of it is carb-based. So they're constantly constantly hungry, constantly needing to eat.
And thinking about it, we've both come from executive life previously, and most of the time in meetings or in conferences or in trainings, that business environment, the food provided is all carb heavy, isn't it? It's all sandwiches, wraps, rolls, pastries, all that stuff. It's only recently that a few more progressive companies think about what they're providing, but most companies in most meetings still provide a bunch of shit food that's easy, convenient, and most people grab for that when they're hungry because they know they're not going to get fed for the next few hours, so they grab what they can.
And it's, even when you talk about conferences, seminars, events, the number of those sort of events that I've been to over the years, and even though they say there's a healthy option or there's a specific diet option, maybe a gluten-free, what you're actually getting is full of sugars and carbs. So it's full of fruit, it's full of additives, it's full of, it's processed
commercial food.
It's commercial food.
It's cheap and nasty.
It is cheap and nasty food. And for the most part, and as you said, I'm not saying every company is like this, but for the most part, it's not really wholesome, healthy food.
No.
So as an executive, you're faced with this choice, and what do? Do I go without? Do I eat the shit food? Do I fuel my carb addiction through these foods? Do I get my executive assistant to go out and find me a really good meal? Or, as many executives are, they're traveling, so they're on long haul flights or short haul flights. They've got airline food, they're going to meetings outside of the office, they're going to events outside of the office, and again, very difficult because they've got very little control.
So we say excuses, but there is genuine reasons.
There's genuine reasons. That they're all excuses, so I'm not going to accept.
You don't get off the hook.
Anybody saying.
If you're tuning in thinking, is she talking about me? She's picked on the mums and dads, and she's picked on the people at home. Now she's on a bent about executives. So if you're getting a bit itchy under the collar and a bit sort of nervous, she's after you because she thinks that you're just coming up with these excuses and they're not genuine. So she's gonna get you.
I am. So so there's and we could spend all day on food.
Okay, so food fasting.
And I think we might do a whole episode on food at some point.
Executive food.
Executive food.
Food for your brain and career.
Exactly.
Food to make you successful.
Because if you eat well, what we know is if you eat well, you will power through your day because you'll be full of superfoods. And I'm not talking about things that are billed as superfoods.
No.
I'm talking about real wholesome brain foods.
Yes.
So maybe an episode on that to come.
Good plan.
Fasting. Again, what we know is intermittent fasting, so fasting perhaps 16 hours a day, eating in an 8-hour window is amazing for our brain health and for our body and for our productivity. How many executives have the sort of discipline to be able to do that sort of fasting? So first of all, they need to be fat adapted, they need to understand this way of eating, and they need to understand the benefits of intermittent fasting. Again, in my experience, I'm not coming across many executives who've already achieved that and are doing it every day because again, they're in those meetings, there's temptation in front of them. First thing in the morning, quite often in the boardroom, you're going to get the fruit, then you'll get mid-morning the Danish pastries or the muffins or the donuts, then there'll be a morning tea for somebody or an afternoon tea.
You've got to be pretty disciplined. I mean, we would say, in the perfect world, when you're fasting, you minimise your exposure to temptation foods when you're going through those early stages, but as an executive, in a career, you don't get that option. You get pushed into places and spaces where there is food around that will tempt you, and it is tough to maintain that fasting if you're surrounded by those sort of foods.
And there's another level another layer in terms of why it's tough, and that's because you may be the one who's organising an event. You may be doing a morning tea to welcome a new person onto the team, or somebody into your office. You may be organising a lunch, team lunch. Well, you're not going to stop. You're not going to avoid the food because you're fasting.
Make them all fast, I say.
So maybe make them all fast.
Team fasting, a team building exercise called fasting.
But the reality is, you can't do that because you're becoming antisocial. You're not being a team player. You're not role modelling the right behaviours, and you're starting to set yourself apart. So as a leader, you've really got to think through, how do I handle these sort of situations and set the right tone, set the right leadership example.
Yes, without ostracising and segregating.
Without ostracising, but also you don't want to be condoning the shit food.
Yes.
So if you're going to do a team thing, and you're going to do an afternoon cake,
you've just built the team and told them they've got shit diets.
Do you really want
bring
to
them up, bring them down?
So there's a lot of complex aspects to it as a leader. So
a bit of leader psychology in there.
There's a fair bit of psychology. Food and fasting.
Food fasting. Movement's a tough one, isn't it? Because we would say in a perfect world, so I'm just doing the perfect world. Perfect world, a wellness pillar is movement. exercise or exercise you love, and to include regular exercise, some morning activity, possibly some evening activity, some stretching and some movement in the morning and evening. And then during the day, maybe 2 or 3 or 4 times a week, some sort of structured exercise routine. So why is that not possible with an executive lifestyle?
So again, you break down the movement and exercise, and you've talked about the different types that you might do, but really as an executive, you want to be able to exercise the body, you want to exercise the cardiovascular system, you really want to keep the heart in good condition. Most executives actually have a really sedentary life. So they may not think that they do because they're rushing around.
Yes.
So they have this concept that they're running from meeting to meeting and rushing, and they are. And that's stressful, which is also bad for them. But they're not doing structured exercise. They're not doing any strength work. They're not doing structured cardio. They're just rushing around
running from chair to chair.
In a very busy way, yeah. And then they sit down.
They sit down for 60 minutes.
They sit on their asses.
There
may be some of them that are doing shorter meetings, or they may have tactics.
But generally, we're generalising. The executive lifestyle is not a physical activity, so we need to fit in, and there becomes the challenge, the prioritisation challenge, fit in some sort of structured movement or exercise.
It is, and one of the challenges is if you've got to go out, classes are often not at times that you can make. You've either got to get up at silly o'clock in the morning, or it's during your working day, or it's in the evening before you've actually got home from the office.
And often it's not the will, it's the logistics around that. It's the logistics around getting up early, exercising, going to work, or taking your kit to work and exercising during work hours, but then showering, changing, getting back to work, or finishing work and making a choice of going home to your family, friends, relaxation, or going to the gym. There's a whole bunch of drivers and logistics that play into that.
They completely are. And again, you may be very deconditioned. So look at that 45 to 65 age bracket. Very, very deconditioned people.
Absolutely.
And they need the right sort of program for them. So, movement and exercise is a challenging one. And again, you might be travelling. So if you're a traveller, you're on the road a lot, you're doing long haul travel, you've got to then find a way to exercise in the locations that you get to, which isn't always easy. It takes time and effort.
Yeah.
And usually the easier answer is I just won't bother. And we hear things like, maybe do squats during your day or do some press-ups on the desk. And the reality is, as an executive, you're not going to do that. You're busy, you've got things to focus on. You're not going to say, I'm going to stop now, I'm going to do a few press-ups. You're sitting in a board meeting, and we know what board meetings are like. They can last 8-10 hours.
Yes.
You're sitting there all day in your chair. There's no real opportunity.
Drop and give us 60, everyone.
It's highly unlikely.
Yes. All right, so we've done food, fasting, we've done movement. What about sleep? Sleep's a big impact. We know it's one of the pillars of wellness. But why are executives challenged around sleep? Because there's the old bravado piece, first of all, isn't there? Where a lot of executives do tend to feel that all the old thinking was, I can do my job, live my life, and be successful on 4 hours sleep.
And I think sleep is a really interesting one, because we now know that sleep is incredibly beneficial for our health, for our mind, for our body, for our productivity. But it's also beneficial for things like decision making.
Yes.
But it's not recognised because you don't see the results overnight, literally. You just don't. You build up sleep. You don't have one night of good sleep and feel amazing.
No.
So I think that, you look at executives, and again, they're travelling, so they're in hotel beds frequently. They may not be able to control their sleep environment. They may not be able to get a nice dark room, because I just, if I had $1 for every time I went to a hotel where there was an artificial light right outside my window, or there were lots of little device lights in the room, and the room was lit up like a Christmas tree. So it's quite often to control that sleep environment. They're often in different time zones. There may be an international executive who's literally dealing with people across different time zones.
Yes.
So they're getting up early to have meetings with their team in one part of the world, or they're staying up late to have meetings with their team in other parts of the world.
Yes.
So their day is irregular. So to have that regular bedtime, wake time is quite difficult. And quite often, I know a lot of executives who have to get up in the middle of the night and take calls, video calls, conference calls.
Yep, because of the time zones.
Because of the time zone. And I'll go back to one of my jobs about 15 years ago.
Just to jump in, because a lot of people tuning in may be going, it's okay for you guys because you've always been in wellness first. But different. I've been an executive for my own lunchbox for years, and I've thought I've been an executive, but you've spent most of your life as a senior executive, and so for a lot of people tuning in, they should be able to understand that this isn't something that you just talk about. You have lived the executive life, and you understand the impact of being an executive and balancing wellness. So talk us through that, just to give some context.
I'll give two examples actually. So I'll give two very specific examples. The first one is just a single job that I did in my career about 15 years ago, working for a large company. So I was working for Shell at the time, so international oil company. There's lots of them around, the 100,000 of you around. And I was working for them in one of their international teams. It's a virtual team, which meant that there were 30 of us. And the 30 of us used to review every one of Shell's capital projects, all of their finances and that sort of thing. And so all of the Shell sites around the world would come along, and this was on a monthly basis. They would come along and they'd put a proposal to us, and they say, look, we want to build a new control room, or we need to replace one of our hydrogenation columns, or our distillation column, we want to bypass it. And they come along with all their projects, big and small. We want to build a new plant, we want to relocate, whatever it was. And we would go through all of these projects. The team was spread out literally across the world, so from Asia Pacific right through to the US, and we had people in multiple different countries. And what used to happen is that once a week we had a meeting, and then once a month we'd have an 8-hour meeting to review all of these proposals.
Lovely.
Now what that meant is that to get the time so that everybody had to take a night shift, we'd vary the time of the meeting. So once a month we'd have this meeting, and it would rotate. So first of all it'd be in one of the US time zones, next month it would be in a European time zone, daytime, and then the next month it would be in an Asia Pacific daytime time zone. And so what it meant is that I would once a month have this 8-hour long meeting where I was on a video call, so I was chained to my desk, and I would literally have to sit there for 8 hours on this video call going through these proposals. First month it might be in my daytime time zone, the next time it would be in my sort of evening to midnight, and then the next month it would be my midnight till 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock in the morning. And I did that for a couple of years, and there was no way around it because we were a truly virtual team. So you can see if you've got that sort of job, and luckily we were only meeting once a month to do that, but if you've got that sort of job, you might be meeting more frequently. You are completely disrupted with your sleep cycles, with your eating cycle.
Absolutely.
You can't get up and exercise because you're stuck in a chair and you're on a video call.
Yep.
So there's times when I've done jobs like that, but I think probably a more valuable example for a lot of people is there was a time when I was doing 2 executive jobs. So I was already working as a vice president for an international company, and I was running their consulting business. And the consulting business was across about 6 different continents. So I had teams in 6 locations, and I used to travel about twice a month to go and visit my teams. So there'd be times when I'd be in Australia, home-based, then there'd be times I'd be in the Middle East or Europe, or there'd be times I'd be in the US. And I used to do that twice a month. So every second week, I would be on a long-haul flight somewhere, anywhere between 8 and 16 hours. So I would spend a couple of days getting there, probably spend 3 or 4 days there, not enough to get over the jet lag, and then I'd fly back. So I was already doing that. It was already a very high-pressure job, and I was dealing with people from the second I woke up. There would be calls, there'd be emails, there'd be messages that would have come in overnight from my teams in other time zones. So I'd start picking those up first thing in the morning.
Yes.
I'd get up, I'd go to the office. I'd sit in probably 45 minutes of traffic, and I'd arrive in the office about 7:30 in the morning. So I was up early, head into the office, early start. And then I'd be in the office dealing with things in the office through until probably about 6 o'clock at night. I'd then sit in another 45 minutes of traffic to get home. I would, wolf down some food, and then my evening would continue, and I'd continue having calls and video conferences and dealing with emails right through till 11, 12, 1 o'clock in the morning. And it was continuous because I literally had people in every single time zone. While I was doing that job, I then took on a second executive role as a managing director for one of our country operations. Now what that meant is I layered on 2 incredibly stressful jobs. So the second job, the company was actually really struggling, they were making a loss, and I was brought in to do a turnaround. So I'm very good at turnarounds because I get in, I assess the situation, I come up with a plan and I can execute it. But that plan required me to fire people, move offices, close offices, basically resolve $1 million loss-making company and get it profitable. I had to go through and assess the staff, and there were a lot of actions, and any executive out there knows the sort of thing I'm talking about. We were bidding the biggest project we'd ever taken on in the history of the company. So all of these things are happening. I've got my global business running on the one hand, I've got this troubleshooting turnaround role, both of which are full-time jobs. I'm running them both at once, and I'm literally driving myself from 6 in the morning until 1 o'clock the next morning. So I'm already working an incredibly long day. So I know what the pressures are. First of all, you've got the mental pressure, the mental stress. You've got these goals to achieve. And quite frankly, companies don't care about their executives.
They don't.
Because a company's fiduciary duty and an executive's fiduciary duty is to the shareholders. So you're trying to make money for your shareholders. You don't give a shit, quite frankly, about your executive's wellness. Executives fall into the trap of performance because they love to perform, they're ambitious, they're competitive, they're driven, they're task focused, they get the job done. So they fall into their own trap and they work incredibly hard and they don't look after themselves. And so I was in exactly that situation, super high stress job, lots of mental pressure, dealing with people in all sorts of different countries with different cultures. There's these long days, and just no time to think about food. And at the time I was dealing with all sorts of issues as well. I had gluten intolerance. So you can layer on all these stresses. And then you say, well, how did I find time to eat well? Well, I didn't. I grabbed food when I could. Did I know about fasting and the benefits? Probably not at the time, or if I did, I didn't have time to think about it. Did I have time to exercise? I always said exercise was my priority, but the reality was when you're travelling long haul, twice a month, you're jet lagged most of the time, you're just across time zones, you don't feel like exercising.
Absolutely.
And you certainly don't have the time to go and do the research to find yourself a place to exercise, and then carrying all the the exercise kit with you as well. So exercise wasn't a reality for me. And then sleep, again, jet lagged, sleeping in different beds, like I said, with rooms that were lit up like a Christmas tree. So it was very, very difficult, and in a very short period of time, like 1 to 1.5 years, I can definitely say that my health suffered enormously, to the point where I was probably a hair's breadth away from being completely burnt out and having to stop work.
So I guess what we've done, we've defined the problem. The problem is the prioritisation. Now, in the blue corner, we have people like you and I saying, you've got to focus on wellness, you've got to look at those pillars of wellness, and you've got to balance, you've got to make sure that you start a wellness journey now, and we give all the reasons and all the compelling evidence. On the other side, there's the executives like you were, and maybe many people who are tuning in, who have this incredibly busy, demanding lifestyle, and they're just trying to climb the corporate or career ladder. Now, the challenge is there's got to be a motivator, there's got to be a reason. I guess the question I want to ask you, and I know you can see this clearly, is why should an executive out there at the moment focusing on their career all of a sudden listen to Buffett 1 and Buffett 2 and say, right, I'm now going to prioritise wellness? What's the downside if the wellness thing doesn't get addressed while you're climbing the corporate ladder?
And to be honest, I think we can say anything we want to, but individuals have to come to their own conclusion on this.
True.
Because I think until you get to a point where you are seriously ill, where you start to see a mental health issue, where you find that your decision making is flawed because you don't have enough sleep, where something actually affects you or your family or your career, you're probably not going to listen to people, because the typical hard-assed, arrogant executive is going to say, it won't happen to me.
And the reason why is you have a work boss, but you don't have a wellness boss. You have a work boss, if you don't deliver, if you don't meet your commitments and your deadlines, is going to say, oi, get it together, otherwise you're going to get in trouble. But the wellness boss doesn't come along until later on, things start to break down. No one's actually saying to you, hang on a second, focus on your wellness.
Or for most executives, they don't have a boss.
No, but there's accountability to the
There's an
company.
accountability,
Yes.
there's an accountability to the shareholders,
Yes.
you're trying to make money. But I think, again, that those people are so driven, they are driven, competitive people.
Yes.
And what floats their boat is making money.
Yes.
It's return on investment, it's completing a project, it's turning a company around. You know, for me, it was turning a company around.
Yes.
To go from $1 million loss to $1 million profit.
Yes.
Wow,
It's a
that's
big-
an amazing
big thrill.
feeling.
Yeah.
To get the same feeling from, say, exercise or just eating well, it's a bit meh. I don't
Yeah.
get that same feeling. So it's very difficult to get a balance,
of scales,
you know, because
or change that balance from being very much career
that's it.
and results focused into that personal wellness focus. Enough of a balance that you start to reap the rewards. But the problem is if you don't, what happens?
Well, look at yourself. So first of all, look at yourself, whatever age you are.
Okay, so those tuning in could be any age, but we're probably more focused on that 45 to 60
Well, we
age
probably
group.
are. So first of all, look at yourself,
Yep.
whatever age you are, and think about yourself 5 years ago.
Okay.
What shape are you in compared to what you were in 5 years ago? Has your health and wellness declined? And by that we mean your energy levels, your mind, your body, your general health, your sleep patterns. Have they improved or got worse?
Good.
Then if you look around you at people in the 45 to 60 age category, because this is when it really starts to show up.
Yes.
You might get away with it until you're about 40,
Yes, 'cause
but then things
the
start
youth is
to
on your
change.
side. Yes. Oh, don't we know it? And those people tuning in are going,
Yeah. So just have a think about the people at the office, in the company, the leaders of the company. What sort of shape are they in if they're in that 45 to 60 age bracket?
Yes.
And I would suggest that 1 out of 3 is probably deconditioned, overweight, maybe even obese. Some of them may have had or maybe battling cancer. Many of them, maybe 1 out of 3, is probably suffering type 2 diabetes.
Yep, that's
and
the
battling
stats.
all sorts of, of issues and illnesses. So basically that is what you're looking at. So if you're younger, that is what you're looking at. If you're at the early end of that age bracket, again, this is what you're looking at if you don't look after your wellness.
that's the role modelling.
That's the first thing. Like I said, you could end up very, very deconditioned,
Yes.
and it's harder to come back.
Yep.
It's always harder to come back from being deconditioned because you sit a lot. Your spine's probably not going to be in a good shape. You may be, stiff and sore. Your joints maybe you may be having joint issues, knees and ankles and hips. You may have these other health issues like the type 2 diabetes or pre-diabetes. So you're probably suffering all that sort of thing. And at the end of the day, you're right at the peak of your career, but you may now be at the point where you actually can't enjoy it because, quite frankly, you feel like shit.
Yes, and that happens so many times where people get, and we'll talk about financial, get that financial or that career success that allows them to actually take the foot off the accelerator and enjoy their life. But physically and wellness-wise, they can't enjoy life because they're facing all these debilitating conditions that they've spent 25, 30 years of their life getting successful. And then the last 25, 30 years of their life, if they make it, is plagued with all sorts of wellness problems. That's the disappointing part.
And think about it, you've got this amazing achievement in your career.
Yeah.
You've built up probably a fair bit of wealth. You've got some assets like house and car.
Yep, but you're fat and sick.
You've got your family, but you can't actually enjoy the time with your family because you don't feel good or you're sick, as you said all the time.
Or you can't enjoy them with the kids, or you can't travel, you can't do all the stuff that you want to do and you can now afford to do. The life, the bucket list holiday or taking the family around the world, you can't do it because you're fat, sick, and you're not in the shape you want to be, and so you can't actually do the things you wanted to do and you've worked your whole bloody life to achieve.
Exactly right. And think about moving forward that, we used to have an average retirement age of what, 60?
Yeah, it used to be. That's no longer the case.
We're now pushing 70 and more. So the general population is going to work a lot longer than they ever probably expected. So if you've got to work till you're 70, think about it now. If you're 40 and you're feeling like shit, you've got another 30 years to go. Imagine how you're going to feel if you keep going like you're going right now.
Yeah, there used to be this rhetoric, when I retire at 55, 60, I'll get in shape. When I retire from my job, I'll take my pension, I'll take my retirement fund, and I'll go and play golf, and I'll go and walk and exercise and live a better life. Now there isn't that stop point. It goes past 60, it goes past 70. So a lot of people will continue to work for the majority of their life. And there is no point to stop and look after themselves if you don't start now.
And that's the other thing, if you're also, if you've got that rhetoric of I'll get well when I'm retired, or I'll enjoy life when I'm retired.
Yes.
The other problem is you may never actually get to that point.
No.
You may die before then.
Yes.
And that's a real serious reality, because
It
look
is.
at the number of deaths that we're seeing in the 60 to 70 age group.
Significant.
So these are the people that are just at that retirement point. They may be able to do an early retirement, and they are dropping down dead from a lot of these issues: cancer, diabetes, heart disease. They're suffering from early onset Alzheimer's or dementia, Parkinson's. And these are fine, amazing people, who've achieved amazing things in their career, and yet they haven't actually had a chance to enjoy it in retirement.
yeah.
So, that could be you. And that is a reality for probably 30% of executives right now. So it really is important to do something about it.
Yeah, and what a lot of executives do, and this is a behavioural trait. Executives, and we're generalising, but a lot of executives are very goal-driven, very results-driven, very leadership focused. And when they, during their career, they'll do something like a boot camp, or they'll do a high-intensity exercise, or they'll go on a retreat. They'll do these little sporadic bursts where they get their return on investment. That'll be their little foray into getting in shape. They'll do something quite intense, short term, but they won't sustain it. What we're talking about is starting some really strong wellness routines that you can start gently and start gradually, and build up, and they underpin and become the pillars of your wellness right through the remainder of your career.
At the end of the day, there's no point being a wellness warrior or a weekend warrior.
A weekend warrior, yes.
Doing a bunch of stuff at the weekends. You go to the gym, you eat really well, you try to catch up on your sleep, and you cram it all in. So you've got up at 5 o'clock in the morning every day during the week, and you've gone to bed at maybe 1 in the morning. So then you have this huge try and catch up. There's no point doing that if you're destroying your health all week, because there's 5 working days, there's only 2 weekend days.
It's not going to, the numbers don't stack up to that.
It's not enough to catch
And you as
up.
executives should know this. You've crunched the numbers.
You've also got family commitments.
Yes.
So how many executives in that 45 to 65 age category
yeah.
have actually got time at the weekend just to do all the things that they want to do? The reality is that, first of all, you bring in your work home because you've got too much work to do.
Yep.
You've got all these goals to achieve. You're very driven. Then you've got all the family obligations. The kids have got stuff that they want to do with you, and so you've got all that. And then you've probably got a social life, which is going to prevent you from being as healthy as you want. So you're probably having a few too many wines on the weekend. You're getting through your day with coffee to keep you awake. You've gone out and had a few social drinks, and in many cases that could lead to a few more than you anticipate. So then you feel like shit all weekend as well.
And if you haven't taken care of your wellness, you probably feel like shit. So all you want to do on the weekend is just rest and recover. Because you're going in, you're tired, you're fatigued, you don't have energy, and you're using that weekend, like a lot of people do, is the rest and recovery time. You don't have the energy to do anything proactive and positive on the weekend.
Into the rest of your life, it affects your relationships with your kids.
It does.
Because you're not the happy, sparkling, fun, mom or dad that you want to be. It affects the relationship with your partner, because again, you're not that happy, fun-loving, sexy person who enjoys life. You're just the grumpy, tired, frazzled executive.
It's just trying to make ends meet.
And that's it. So, then it starts to filter through into your relationships with your partner and your kids.
Yeah,
and before you know it, there's even more falling apart.
And the big one, which if you're tuning in and going, yeah, blah, 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 we've heard this before, one of the reasons you're not focusing on your wellness is because you're focusing on your career. And one of the major undoings of your career could be not focusing on your wellness. Because we do know, as you get into later life as a career person, if your health and wellness puts you into the category where you're considered to be an older employee or an older executive, and you can't keep up, can't cope, don't have the mental clarity, don't have the capabilities of some of the younger executives coming through, you'll get the boot. You'll get kicked out. You won't get the career result that you deserve because you can't keep up with the young crew coming through and taking your role.
Exactly
So
right.
there's an absolute driver to get your shit together and get well, to keep your job, but also look after yourself.
Exactly right. So I think the first thing is, and we're not going to fix it overnight.
No.
And we will be doing some more
We'd love to,
episodes
yes.
around. We would, but we'll do some more episodes about this. I think the first thing to recognise is that when we talk about wellness, we're actually talking about wellness as a marathon, not a sprint.
Yes.
So a lot of executives want to see this as a sprint. They literally pull on their shoes, run out the door, and they try and sprint 100 metres as fast as possible. And that's the weekend mentality.
Yes.
It doesn't work because you can't keep it up.
Yes, if you're an executive listening, think of it as a project, a 30-year project, because you are familiar with projects and project planning and project methodology. So don't think of it as a sprint. Think of it as a 20 to 30-year project you've got to plan and execute over a 30-year period.
So if you think about a project or a marathon.
A marathon. It's
Think
a good analogy.
Think about the marathon. You don't go into a marathon without training. A marathon lasts a long time, so you've got to prepare for it, you've got to plan for it, you've actually got to have the things on the way that you need, like, you know, if you're going to have snacks along the way or if you're going to have water stops along the way, you need to know the route.
Absolutely.
You need to have direction in mind, you need to have a goal. So you need to have a goal. Where are you going to get to with your wellness journey? And then you set out on the journey. So rather than treating it like that, I'll just pull on my sneakers and I'll go for a run, treat it more like a marathon. Think about what you need to do. Take small steps initially like you would with a marathon. You'd start your training small and you build up gradually.
Absolutely.
So again, treat it like a marathon where you do build it up gradually. You do build on a foundation. So you get a foundation, you build on that. You can reach higher and higher levels of performance and wellness. And if you do that, you'll build yourself a sustainable program that's for life. Because at the end of the day, wellness, it's a long game.
Yes.
It's not an overnight fix. It is a long game. Start small, but just start.
Follow the plan.
Follow the plan.
And get the results
and you
you
will
deserve.
get there.
Yeah.
You will.
And then join us again on the Peace Life. We will keep you motivated because Lynn is on a bender for anybody who calls themselves an executive to make sure that you get the results you deserve and give you that motivation and encouragement. So we'll see you next time on the Peace Life.